Hello, David. How are you?
I am fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to read your bio just so that folks kind of know about some of the stuff you've done and some of the stuff you've written if they don't already. So David Burkus is Associate Professor of Management at the College of Business at Oral Roberts University, where he teaches courses on creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship, and organizational behavior. He is the author of The Myths of Creativity, The Truth About How Innovative Companies Generate Great Ideas, and Under New Management, How Leading Organizations Are Upending Business as Usual. He is also the founder and editor of LDRLB, an online publication that shares insights from research on leadership, innovation, and strategy. His work has been featured in Forbes, Bloomberg Businessweek, Psychology Today, Fast Company, and the Harvard Business Review. So yeah, you've done a lot. So tell me a little bit more. So give me sort of the flavor behind that, the stuff that didn't come out in that paragraph.
I mean, you make me sound way cooler than I really am. But I mean, so I'm a weird case. I came to my undergraduate education as an English major, as a writing major, sort of wanting to be that great American novelist type person until, I kind of learned that nobody makes any money doing that. That was lesson one. Lesson two was I was in school around the time that your Malcolm Gladwells and Daniel Pinks and Chip and Dan Heaths of the world began writing began writing books. And I sort of fell in love with that genre, whatever you'd call that, writing about social science, or some people call them like the idea book. But that idea that you could blend social science research and practical application was fascinating to me from a genre standpoint, but then also just from a knowledge and insight standpoint. So kind of I wouldn't call it a 180-degree pivot, but I switched from being sort of English to organizational psychology, and all my graduate degrees are along that route. But the goal was not to ever sort of do my own research. I'm a terrible researcher. The goal was always to take really awesome insights from the best researchers in the world and then use my writing background to translate that. Or as I like to say now a lot of times on the podcast, to tear down the wall between the ivory tower and the corner office.
Wow. I mean, that's a great phrase. And tearing down that wall is something we all need a little more of in our lives, right?
Yeah, well, I think the best way to say it, actually, John Acuff already says, where he talks about how he likes to put handles on ideas to make them easier to pick up and take around. If that wasn't already taken, I would have stolen it. But we're both on the summit. So
you can take it now. Take it now. I won't.
But yeah, but same idea. I think there's a lot of amazing insights from the world of social science that we don't know because they're buried in academic journals, using, a 21st grade reading level, not even 12th grade reading level, but like ridiculous verbosity and all that sort of stuff. And so my goal is to kind of I read those so you don't have to.
Wow, that's awesome. So tell us about Under New Management, because so you just came out with this book a few months ago, and I have not read it yet. I loved your other book, but this book I feel like was made for me because I have lots of kind of post-traumatic stress disorder regarding working in Silicon Valley. And I think it's so interesting because, I worked at Twitter for almost 6 years, and it was one of those companies that would always appear in online roundups of this is what it's like to work in these new innovative companies. And yet in reality, there's so much bad stuff going on because no one did the research to figure out that certain things may look cool, but they don't actually work or help you work better.
Yeah. Well, and that's a really good summary of kind of the inspiration for writing the book. Is there's a lot in the business press and your Inks and Fast Company and Business Insider about, hey, look at this really cool new policy idea. And some of them are really cool and backed by science, and others just sound really cool. And that was, the goal in writing Under New Management was to kind of have this collection of those, but a couple different sort of litmus tests for whether or not they came in. The first was that they had to work not only at the kind of hot new startup, but they also had to work at the factory or the supermarket or, some other job. They had to work regardless of size. One of the weird tragedies for a lot of entrepreneurs is you sort of escape the bureaucracy to do your own thing. And then when you start to scale, the only thing you know is the bureaucracy you left behind. So you take it with you and you sort of replicate it out. And then the last thing was it had to work in a lot of different types, and there had to be sort of a deeper level to it, right? So that was a lot of the social science piece, and it had to kind of be applicable because just because Twitter does it or Google does it, et cetera, doesn't mean it works for you. But if there's an underlying principle, then that might actually work. So, I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the ideas we talk about in the book is unlimited vacation. Netflix popularized it. It sounds amazing.
We had that at Twitter. Yep.
Right. And it works for some organizations and it doesn't work for others. And it turns out like the big thing that determines whether or not it worked is it's actually not about the number of vacation days. It's about trust. At Netflix, micromanaging vacation days was seen as an act of distrust. You don't trust us, so you're making us write this out. So removing it communicated trust to those employees. That's what matters. That might be in your vacation policy. That might be in your expense report policy. That might be somewhere else. But if there's places where you're communicating distrust to the people you work with, that's the real problem.
Huh. So that's really, I mean, the vacation day thing I thought was always interesting too, because, I'd read that, 40% of Americans don't take their vacation, right? So you've got that on one hand, but then you've got this other side where I think there was this feeling also of guilt associated with taking vacation when you have this unlimited vacation policy, which is weird. It's like you don't almost know the boundaries, and so you feel bad, like you're always pushing them or something if you take vacation, which was a strange dynamic.
Right. And again, it comes down to how you roll it all out. If you're a lot of times like a Netflix talks about unlimited vacation, and one of the things that gets lost in the chatter is the senior leadership were very showy about the amount of vacation they were taking, and managers were encouraged to really make a point that they're taking it so that everybody caught on that like this is okay, et cetera. I mean, on average, you find people take about the same amount of vacation days in unlimited vacation than before, which, again, as you said, 40% of Americans don't take their full amount. So it's still a frighteningly low number of vacation. But, and this is where that trust piece comes back, it's really about this was seen as something where people weren't feeling trusted by the organization, so we got rid of it. That's the reason. And right after they got rid of unlimited vacation, once it sort of worked, they also changed their expense report policy to 5 words, act in Netflix's best interest, which is, again, it's not about the money, it's about that trust piece. So it really comes down to that. So you may or may not be able to pull off unlimited vacation, but I think every organization has some policy that's being seen as, well, the higher ups don't trust us because otherwise there wouldn't be this policy.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about some other things. Let's talk about open office floor plans, because I know this is something you touch on in the book. I'm so curious. So tell us everything.
Yeah, these are one of our love-hate relationship type things, right? So there's a decent amount of research that in an open office floor plan, you have increases in collaboration, you have these more sort of serendipitous occurrences happen. This is something that like everybody really popularized, the Pixar building that Steve Jobs helped design, and it had the one big bathroom, the legendary sort of one big place where the bathroom was for 1,000 people, and the idea was everybody has to go to this one space, so they have to interact, and that makes sense. The research behind serendipity sort of makes sense of that. I tend to believe that the real trend line increase in open offices is actually explained by cost. It's just a lot cheaper to put out a bunch of tables and say, here's your office.
Doesn't it look cool? Because we haven't even painted the walls. They're rustic, right?
Right, exactly. But it's cool and industrial. So, there's always the good reason and the real reason. I think cost is the real reason. But everything is a trade-off. And so you might have increases in collaboration and serendipity and those sort of things. But the research is also really clear that people are more likely to experience stress in an open office floor plan. They're more easily distracted. One of my favorite studies shows that people are more likely to call in sick in an open office floor plan. Now, we don't know if that's like germs spread more often or if that's just people are sick of work, so they're not coming in as often.
Right.
Sick of their open office, maybe, who knows? But I think, again, everything is a trade-off and there are costs and benefits. And in my opinion is that the costs and benefits, that they don't favor open offices. In reality, one of the biggest pieces of research around this, about environment and performance, is on perceived control. In other words, how much does an employee feel like they can control their workplace? And in a lot of places, what that actually means is creating an environment where people can actually move around, move into closed off spaces when they need that, move into open, loud spaces when they need that, and have some say over their work environment. And that, by the way, applies whether you work for an organization or whether you work for yourself. This idea of knowing what environment you need for that type of work and demonstrating that control over it has a very strong effect on your performance.
I mean, I was reading that there's studies showing that I guess creativity increases when you're outside of your regular workspace, so like outside of your desk or your office or something, and it's why people should maybe go to coffee shops. I wonder if that has something to do with that.
Yeah, and so I mean, we have to be careful when we say creativity. A lot of times in those studies, what we refer to is divergent thinking, which is like a subset that means your ability to come up with lots of different ideas and or lots of different solutions for a problem. And that's sort of true. But the trick is, I mean, you think about the creative process, you need that to kind of kickstart it. But once you know which idea you're running with, your environment probably shifts to one where you can sit down, focus, and not be distracted. And that's that control and flexibility piece. You have to know the type of work you're about to do and then have the control and the autonomy to say, what's the best environment to do this next task?
So you have a quote in The Myths of Creativity where you say that creativity is a team sport. And so I want to know how that connects to this idea that maybe, working in an open office and going for this, all collaborative all the time ideal isn't, how do those seem like disparate things?
Yeah. So, I mean, the fundamental reason we say that creativity is a team sport is that almost any time you have this myth of the lone creator, right? So you used to work at Twitter, there's a lot more people responsible for that than just Jack, Jack was a great founder and we love the founder story, but there's a lot more people involved, right? Same thing with sort of Apple. Everybody loves to talk about Steve Jobs, but we also have to talk about Steve Wozniak, Tony Fadell, Johnny Ive, a bunch of other people. And normally whenever you see a story of this sort of one amazing lone creator, lone innovator, that story has been rewritten to write out a lot of people. And so we know this. We know that these people sort of exist from history. Even you go back to sort of Thomas Edison, the sort of Steve Jobs of his day, or maybe Jobs is the Edison of art, whatever. Even he had help, right? Michelangelo painted the Sistine Chapel along with 14 other people that helped him, right? And the problem is we can send the message, and especially to sort of solopreneurs, we can send the message that if you need help, that's a problem because all of these great paragons never needed help. Right. And that's not true at all. Creativity is a team sport, and so when and if you need help, you're just like everybody else that ever accomplished anything worth remembering. You had help to do it. Now, so as it plans in the open office space, we go back to when do you need it and where? I mean, definitely that sort of loud, big collaborative environment when you're ideating, when you're divergent thinking, when you're coming up with lots of different ideas, hugely helpful, right? Also, probably when you're looking at feedback on a prototype of an idea and trying to come up with ideas for revisions, yes. But then there are other times where you have to sort of butt in seat and crank out the work. That may or may not lend itself to an open floor plan. So again, we see in different stages in the process, we need different environments. Definitely, there are some areas where that team element works really, really well, and that favors that openness. But then there are just as many times in the process where we need a little bit more closure, a little bit more individualness to sit down and focus.
So I want to ask about this idea of resources, because you have this quote, and so folks watching this, some of them are going to be in companies that have a lot of resources, but a lot of them are going to be kind of on their own, whether they dream to be on their own or they already are on their own, right? And they don't have a lot of resources. They're not like, there's not organic food in the cafeteria every lunch or whatever it may be. And so you have this quote where you say, this is a hard truth for some to accept, that a lack of resources may not be their true constraint. It's just a lack of resourcefulness. Talk to me about this idea of resources, because I know at a company like Twitter, we had tons of resources. Right. That was not necessarily just a good thing.
Right. And a lot of this comes from this belief. A lot of times when we hit a creative block, when we're stuck, we tend to look at our constraints and go, oh, if only that constraint were removed, there'd be no problem. And that's true, but by saying that, we're kind of limiting our ability to tap into our own sort of creativity. Constraints help us understand the problem better. Constraints shape the box in which we have to think. And if we just point and say, well, we need to think outside the box, that doesn't help us because we're stuck in the box, right? So the only solutions that help are sort of in that box. And that's where that resources versus resourcefulness comes in. Like a lot of times you'll find that a lack of resources, that the constraints that produced allowed you to think about the problem differently. Right. Most of the time when you're complaining about resources, it's because the first 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 solutions you came up with require those resources. But the truth is, the real genius lies when you get to like your 50th idea, your 75th idea, your 100th idea. And you don't get to that unless you're willing to accept the constraints of the situation.
So what do you, when, you did tons of research for Under New Management, you looked at all these companies. Are there things in this book that you think can help the way that a small entrepreneur working from their home office can work today?
Yeah. So, I mean, Missive Creativity, definitely that book's kind of divided between individuals and then the team. And I think even if you're a solopreneur, you've got to recognize that you have a team. They're just usually people you work with instead of work for you or that you work for, right? But even you, the way that you run your business, there are lots of people who are on your team that make the business of Claire successful, even if there's no employees, right? So there's that realization. Inside Under New Management, again, there's the top level idea, and then there's the principle underneath it, right? And the lesson for the principle underneath it kind of applies regardless of the type of employee that you, or the number of employees that you have, right? So the opening chapter in Under New Management is all about getting rid of email, right? Because it's a terrible collaboration tool for companies and teams. There are a lot of the better tools are actually older. They're things like the phone or walking down the hall and talking to people. But the lesson inside of that chapter is about distractions and how we don't check our email anymore. Our email checks us.
Wow.
And even if you're an individual, I mean, it's true. If you have a smartphone, it's going off every 5 minutes. It's not like the old dial-up days where you had to make a conscious decision to go to AOL, right, to find out if you had mail.
Right.
Now it comes right to you and sort of checks with you. Is it okay if I bug you right now? It better be, because I already did. That's what happens now. So even if you're a solopreneur, like, you need to get a handle on, and especially if you're a solopreneur, you need to get a handle on when is it okay to be reached by people and when am I in my downtime. And especially if it's just us, if the whole business is us, we're going to feel like we're 24/7, 365. And that's not good. That's a recipe for burnout. You're going to end up kind of being an employee again in 5 years because you're going to get so tired of it. Right? So we need to take a conscious effort on that downtime of when is it okay to be reached by people and when is it not. We don't use the do not disturb function on our phone nearly as often as we should.
Okay, so let's talk more practically. What should we be doing about email? Tell us about this.
All right, so my recommendation to most places is we need to figure out where we should set the boundary. Some companies, the boundary is we band it entirely internally and we move to some other electronic communication system. That could be an off-the-shelf thing like Slack. That could be something that we build. For most people, my recommendation is it's not about what we're using, but when we're using it. So we need to take a conscious inventory of what are the hours that we need to not be on. For some people, that's nights and weekends. For some people, it's just weekends. For some people, it's not even during the day. There may be times where we need to not be reached. I mean, I recommend to a lot of smaller teams and companies between 10 and 2, just stop doing the internal email thing. You might do it at 8 in the morning, at 4 o'clock. But pick the hours in your day where, like, this is where I'm not interrupted. At a minimum, we should be talking about how to not take it home with us. I mean, if you have a smartphone, you take your work home with you every single day.
Yep.
And that shouldn't happen. So the other day, I was talking to a friend of mine who's an exec at a fairly big firm, and he was asking about this. And I told him, you have an iPhone, go buy an iPod and install every app that's on your phone except. So you go home, you still have that little addiction of holding the device. But you're not doing your work email. You can do Facebook and all that other stuff, but not your work email. We need some kind of boundary like that. But that boundary is different for every single person. So it starts with that inventory of when is this helping me, when is this hurting me, and how do I eliminate checking it when it's hurting me?
I mean, I've always, I think, like, prided myself on being good at email, but I realized I had this major blind spot a couple months ago. I was at this event with Greg McEwen, who wrote Essentialism, and we were doing this, like, year-long retreat thing. Every 90 days we go and learn more about how we're not essentialists and how
Were
we
you
should
at the
be.
90-day year?
No, I should have been.
Okay. I was like, that sounds a lot like the 90-day year retreat. All right.
And so we were talking about email, and someone was asking for some advice on email, and I became overly heated about this. And Greg was saying to me something like, I think you've got some issues there you've got to work out. And I realized, I've always prided myself of being so good at email that the blind spot that I had created is I was creating a defense for why I kept email on my iPhone. And so this and talking to some other friends who really encouraged me to do it finally got me to take email off my phone. And it's a game changer in terms of boundaries and email.
Yeah. Even just turning off push, right? So if you know what that is, Yes. If you don't, go look up how to do it. Basically, it goes back to that checking for email instead of letting your email check you. That can be a huge game changer. Or what a lot of, if you don't want to do that, I mean, I actually recommend the iPod Touch solution because it feels like a phone, but it's not your work type thing. And people can't call you, which is awesome. I hate when people call me, but that's a whole other dilemma. Even just that, setting those boundaries can be useful. And if you can't do that, even just dragging it for most people, it's at the very bottom of their iPhone or Android, and it's always there no matter what screen you scroll over to.
Right.
Even just dragging it, like it's Friday afternoon, I'm going to drag this all the way to the rearmost screen, and then on Monday morning, I'll drag it back. Even that creates enough of a separation to give us some breathing room.
Wow. I mean, yeah, those are fantastic tips. So what about, you must have dug into this idea of sort of meetings when you were writing this book and sort of what meetings create in terms of our productivity or lack of productivity. What did you learn about meetings?
So meetings have a bad rap. I definitely think there are terrible meetings out there. But I mean, I have a piece in the Harvard Business Review called "Know That Meeting Couldn't Just Be an Email," because that's like the number one complaint. Like, oh, this whole meeting. If that's the case, I mean, if the whole purpose of the meeting is to convey information, then maybe. But meetings are also great because the real value of a meeting happens when people are bouncing ideas off of each other, not when people are coming to report. Right? So I think meetings get a bad rap because so often there are people coming to report, and you're right, some of that could have been communicated. But then we also have to be careful of what we say could be an email and what couldn't be, because a lot of things we need the contextual variables of tone of voice and facial expressions and all of that sort of stuff to get it. So ultimately, I mean, I think meetings get a little bit of bad rap, and we can kind of adapt them. I don't believe in the sort of like we banned all meetings type thing, because there is real value to connecting with other humans, right? The one thing that sort of all businesses share is that they're started by humans and they're started to interact with other humans. And even in the sort of bot and machine age, like there's still going to be, it's people all the way down. And so you're still going to need interactions with people. The question is knowing what's the right medium for the right message. So that I think is a really good one. There's actually a great resource. Cameron Herold, who used to be one of the execs at 1-800-GOT-JUNK, one of the entrepreneurs that sort of scaled that thing, just came out with a book called Meetings Suck. And I love stuff with contrarian titles. And so we picked that up, and it's a really, really good book around kind of not how to ban them, but how to make them actually not suck.
I love that. I love that. This has been super, super valuable. Can you talk to me a bit about what you're really working on right now and where folks can find out more about you?
Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm working on right now is really just kind of spreading the ideas in under management. I think there's a lot of stuff in that and in Missive Creativity that can help a lot of people. In fact, you go to the website, davidburkus.com, the first question I'll ask is like, how can I help? Can I help with creativity? Can I help with what can I do to help? So that's what I'm really focused on. I can tell you we have an inkling of an idea for the next book and the next idea, but we're at the very beginning of that process, and I don't need the rejection yet. I need the ideas now. So I won't share too much about that. But really, I mean, the book's only been out for about 2 months, so I'm really about spreading the word of under new management and how can we help with those people. So best place to find info on that is at davidburkus.com. That's also where the podcast is. That's also where, I mean, there's a ton of free resources. Obviously, I hope you buy the book in triplicate, but if you don't want to do that, there's a ton of free resources on the site too for you to check out.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. This was really great.
Yeah, thank you for having me.